little while back, I put together a video looking at the story of SummerSlam 1992 while briefly talking about the matches that took place at the show. At the end of that video, I said I'd upload another video in the future where I would take a closer look at the main event of SummerSlam 92, Bret Hart vs Davey Boy Smith. And well, here it is. Bret vs Bulldog at SummerSlam 1992 is considered by many to be the greatest match in SummerSlam history. Davey Boy winning the Intercontinental Championship in Wembley is one of those moments in wrestling that lives forever. But there's an interesting and very real story behind the SummerSlam 1992 main event that'll maybe give you a new appreciation for the match and the abilities of Bret Hart. So today we're going to go back to Wembley Stadium in 1992 to take an in-depth look at Hart vs Smith. Two locations were considered for SummerSlam 1992, London or Washington DC. Initial plans for Bret Hart would see the Hitman drop the Intercontinental Championship to Shawn Michaels at the pay-per-view, and Bret had pitched an idea to Vince where he and Shawn would have a ladder match at SummerSlam for the IC title. But when JJ Dillon let it slip that SummerSlam could take place in Wembley Stadium, Bret put forward an idea where he would instead drop the IC Championship to Davey Boy Smith in front of Bulldog's fellow countrymen. Davey could then lose the title to Shawn Michaels soon afterwards. Vince McMahon liked both ideas, so he requested that Bret and Shawn had a trial ladder match. The first ever ladder match in the WWF took place in Portland, Maine on the 21st of July 1992. And according to Bret, Vince didn't even watch the match. By the time the ladder match took place, Wembley Stadium was already selected as the location for SummerSlam, so Bret would face Davey Boy Smith at the big show, and what's more, the match would take place in the main event. To build the match up, a camera crew was sent to the Hart House in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The Harts would talk about how this battle is going to tear the family apart. Owen Hart showed support for Bret, while Bruce Hart made it clear that he was rooting for Davey Boy. Diana Hart, Bret's sister and Davey's wife, would end up becoming an important piece of the puzzle. This match, in storyline, was going to affect her more than anyone else, seeing as her loyalties would be tested when her brother and her husband went to war. And in the end, Diana couldn't choose a side. She just hoped that neither man would get hurt. All this stuff though was standard surface level storytelling. It was a natural story that just wrote itself, and it did work really well for the SummerSlam main event. What's way more interesting is the stuff that went on behind the scenes though. It's incredible to think that while Davey Boy Smith was getting handed a moment that could push his career to the next level, he really wasn't all that enthusiastic about the contest. Davey was just getting over a wellness suspension, and to top it off, Davey ended up hospitalised with a staph infection mere weeks before the big show. This, along with the lifestyle of a pro wrestler back in the early 90s, put Davey in a bad place during the summer of 1992. And while Bret said that the Hitman was obsessing over the match for weeks leading up to SummerSlam, it seemed like Davey had some real trouble realising how monumental this main event truly was. Before SummerSlam, Davey hadn't wrestled in over a month. Bret Hart wrote in his book, "I constantly phoned Davey down in Florida, but all Diana could tell me was that he was out with Jim somewhere. I finally tracked Jim down just hours before I was leaving for England, and I was shocked when he told me that he had just taken Davey and Diana to the airport. Davey was high as a kite when he caught his flight," Jim said, because he'd been up all night smoking crack with him. "Jim told me that Davey had a gorilla on his back and he was worried about him. I wish Jim would have took a good look at himself. I couldn't have been more disappointed in Davey and feared he would end up making us both look bad." When I arrived in London, hundreds of fans poured out of the hotel lobby to chant my name in the streets. I set off to find Davey, but he was off somewhere with Diana and his family. I didn't see him until the required entrance rehearsal at Wembley Stadium the night before the show. When I asked him why he hadn't returned my calls all summer, he wasn't able to look at me in the eye. He fessed up that he'd been smoking crack with Jim for weeks and now he was terrified. He'd gone back to being that same helpless kid I rescued from Dynamite 10 years earlier. "Trust me, Davey, and I'll do all I can to get you through tomorrow, okay?" He nodded, and I sat him down for a crash course, going over and over our match and making him recite the moves back to me. It was now completely up to me to save our match. So Bret went into SummerSlam with the match in his head while Davey was struggling to keep his head straight, according to Bret's book anyway. Vince McMahon apparently didn't want to know the finish. McMahon knew that Davey was going to win, but Vince wanted Bret to surprise him with how the match would play out, something that Vince rarely did, if ever. Another concern for Bret was the other matches at SummerSlam running too long, leading to the main event being shortened down due to time constraints, but that wasn't a problem when all was said and done. Hart vs Davey got a good 25 minutes from bell to bell, with only the Randy Savage vs Ultimate Warrior match running ever so slightly longer. The biggest issue, really, and the most well-documented issue, was the fact that Davey Boy Smith wasn't in the right frame of mind at all to work this match. And according to the Hitman, it was really up to Bret to make sure the SummerSlam main event went as planned. Davey would simply need to get carried from bell to bell. Not only did Bret and Davey get through the match though, they somehow managed to put on an absolute classic. Bret and Davey get interviewed before their big match, and honestly, you wouldn't know there was anything wrong with Davey while watching his promo, although do remember that SummerSlam wasn't live. There was room here for superstars to redo their interviews if it didn't go too well. Davey says there's no pressure tonight, this is a dream for him, and another dream he has is becoming the IC champion tonight after the final bell. Bret may be Davey's brother-in-law, but when both men get inside the ropes, Bulldog says he's never met Bret Hart and he doesn't know Bret Hart. Davey also says that he hopes the family can reunite after the matchup. Mean Gene interviews Bret, and a focused Hitman says he's proven himself in high-pressure situations before. Bret wants Davey to look at him and try to say he doesn't know who he is after it was Bret who introduced Bulldog to his sister Diana in the first place. Bret isn't happy with Davey's lack of gratitude, saying as the Hitman also helped Davey get elevated in the World Wrestling Federation. If it wasn't for Bret, Davey wouldn't be where he is right now in terms of this title opportunity. Davey wanted this match, it's Davey's fault that the Hart family has fallen apart. And as for Davey's dream of winning the IC title at Wembley, the Bulldog's gonna have a nightmare tonight. Tomorrow morning, the British Bulldog will feel like he's woke up in the dungeon of Windsor Castle. Diana Hart gets interviewed in the audience. Diana says she's worried that both men might seriously hurt each other in what's going to be the biggest match of their respective careers. Diana doesn't care who wins, the family bond is what's important here. Before we dig a little deeper into the match, what you have to keep in mind here is that Bret had to be very careful not to go full-blown heel during this main event. As easy as it would have been for the Hitman to get heat in Wembley Stadium, he made sure he didn't overdo it while also ensuring that both Davey and himself would come out of this one looking like heroes. Take a moment to really think about the pressure here. Bret had to keep his character intact. He had to look out for Davey while also making Bulldog look like a star. He had to put on a show-stopping match that proved he was ready for the big main event matches in the WWF Championship, and all this had to happen in front of around 80,000 rabid fans. The sky was a beautiful purple-blue by the time our match was called. Davey went out before me to a huge ovation. I was banking on the sense that the British fans truly loved me but would feel they had to support their fellow countrymen. To all the fans watching via satellite, I'd be a huge underdog. Today, I'd break all their hearts and win their undying loyalty. I was betting my career on it. The aisle was so long that my usual entrance music played twice as I made my way down to the ring, the picture of confidence in my leather ring jacket. English football horns trumpeted through a crowd of all ages while Union Jacks fluttered in the soft breeze. I was eased by the sight of numerous pink and black signs, and I had the distinct sense that God was with me as I silently vowed to show Vince, Davey and the whole world how good I was. As I stood nose to nose with Davey, he appeared to be every bit as determined, both of us unflinching warriors refusing to give way before battle. Joey Morella gave Davey and me the rules, the three of us momentarily awestruck by the size of the crowd. We pushed off with Davey looking strong and serious. The crowd was ours and the bell sounded. At first, Davey outmaneuvered me with simple and realistic wrestling, but after only a few minutes, he was breathing hard. "Bret, I'm fucked," Davey panted as I had him clamped in a side headlock. "I can't remember anything." "Davey, just listen to me, I'll carry you." Joey shot me a worried look. This would be the test of my career. We're going to jump back and forth from Bret's Best There Is DVD and Bret's book in order to gain more insight as the match progresses. After Davey communicates to Bret that he's forgotten the match, and when Bret realises he'll have to call every spot, the Bulldog gets out of the side headlock by applying a hammerlock. You can see here that Davey looks blown up and we're only minutes into the matchup. Bret gets out by elbowing Davey in the face, and this gets a round of boos from the audience. This was the type of thing Bret had to be careful about. Bret applies a wrist lock, and this gives the Bulldog a little time to recuperate, and then Davey pulls off an excellent wrist lock reversal that gets the crowd back into the match. Davey gets a little confidence back here it seems, and he ends up catching Bret after an Irish whip, and the Hitman takes a slingshot to the top turnbuckle. Davey brings it back to the mat with an armbar while the crowd still cheers from the slingshot. Bursts of powerful offense followed by submissions would be the best thing to do here it seems, as it allows Davey to refocus and it allows Bret and the referee to communicate the next spot to the Bulldog. Bret gets lifted into the air while Davey keeps wrist control, and the competitors again go down to the mat. Half of Wembley chants Bulldog and half of Wembley chants Hitman as Bret again gets to his feet. Davey Boy performs a crucifix pin, but Bret kicks out. Davey again goes straight to a submission hold, a basic hammerlock, but it really doesn't matter what Bulldog does here, the fans are completely invested. The competitors get up again, Bret slams Davey, but Davey holds on to Bret and we're once again on the mat. Bulldog keeps hold of the wrist, and it's at this time where Bret realises that they need to change it up and kick things up a few notches. Bulldog gets whipped into the ropes and Bret hits a knee strike. Bret gets booed by the audience as he begins attacking a grounded British Bulldog. Again, Bret needed to be careful here. Davey takes a leg drop before Bret applies a chin lock, and again, you can clearly see the referee and Hart talking to Davey. Davey doesn't say a word. Bret nails Davey with a back elbow, Davey hits the mat hard, and then Bret stays on offense for a little while with an elbow drop, an inverted atomic drop, and a crucifix pin reversal that sees Davey take a Samoan drop. We're now back to the chin lock, and the cameras again pick up Bret calling spots to Davey. And many of you may think that this is perfectly normal. It's normal for guys to get caught out talking to their opponents, but it's very, very rare to see Bret Hart get caught out so many times. But really, he had no choice. Everything was going really well so far, and it was thanks to Bret giving what looked like really detailed instructions to Davey. The communication throughout the match only becomes distracting when you really look out for it. The next spot is a drop down leapfrog monkey flip sequence. Bret then gets sent from one corner to the other, but he gets a foot up. The Hitman then nails a Bulldog on the Bulldog, but Davey's able to wake up while Bret climbs upstairs and Hart gets slammed to the mat. Bulldog tries a top rope move of his own, but Bret moves out of the way. He then tries a roll up, but Bret sends Davey to the outside of the ring. These last few moments here have done wonders in getting the audience even more invested in the matchup. The Hitman gave a little more insight into the next spot on his Best There Is DVD. Bret said, "I was supposed to dive over the top rope and Davey was supposed to catch me. He's gotta know I'm coming. Here I come. I went sailing over the top rope and, of course, Davey totally forgot to catch me. As I was spiraling out of the ring, toppling down towards him, I almost bulldogged him backwards. It was like a backwards headlock. I just saved my life is what I did. If you watch it, I'm lucky I didn't blow my knee out. There was a lot of risky things that happened in that match, and when it was over, I felt every bit of it. I really took a beating." Bret then rams Davey into the ring post before the match gets back inside the ropes. Hart delivers a few strikes, a Russian leg sweep, and Davey takes a few hard European uppercuts before Bret nails a dropkick. Davey takes a back body drop and Hart applies another chin lock that gives both superstars a chance to take a breather. That's 3 chin locks for those keeping count, and we have more to come. The Hitman nails a buttery smooth suplex. He tries to get a pinfall win, but Davey kicks out and it's straight back to the chin lock. And I do have to repeat here, it's working in the context of this match. It's really nitpicking to point out each and every rest hold because the bigger picture tells us a different story, but if we're going to look at this match, we might as well do it properly. Also, viewers of this channel know we have a little fun with Davey Boy Smith being the man who always goes for chin locks during his matches, so it's quite funny that he's on the receiving end here so frequently. Anyway, moving on, Davey tries a backslide but it only gets him a 2 count. Diana watches on as the Hitman takes the lead again. Davey gets nailed with a backbreaker. We see Bret's signature second rope elbow drop, and then Bret goes into heel territory by lifting Davey up by the hair and slamming him to the mat. Bret acknowledges what he's just done by looking out at the audience as Wembley Stadium continues to rally behind the British Bulldog. A snapmare from the Hitman leads to Davey getting chin locked again, and once both men get back to their feet, Bret applies a sleeper hold. Let's go to Bret's book for the next sequence of moves. Bret wrote, "I locked Davey in a sleeper hold and the crowd immediately got behind him, cheering him on to revive himself as he crawled to the ropes gasping for air. I snapped a beautiful boot straight to his face, grazing the tip of his nose like I'd snapped it hard with my finger to wake him up. The drama built, layer upon layer, as every move that came followed a logic that never detracted from the story. I had hit Davey with my whole arsenal. I locked in the sleeper. As he sank to his knees, I called the spots into his ear and he rose up to his feet with me on his back. Staggering backwards, he ran me into the corner with all his weight, nearly snapping my neck in half on the top rope for real. But there was no time to sell as I slapped on the sleeper one more time. Again, Davey sank to his knees as Joey muttered, 'Do you guys hear that? This is unbelievable.' We went into a beautiful sequence of moves, ending up with an old Hart Foundation Bulldog spot where a groggy Davey went for a press slam, but he lost his balance and accidentally crotched me on the ropes, to the roar of the crowd. Davey has no problems getting the crowd back into it by hitting Bret with a series of clotheslines followed by a press slam. Davey then hits a perfect signature vertical suplex as the flash bulbs go off inside Wembley, and Bret takes his chest first bump into the top turnbuckle. All this isn't enough to end the match though. This burst of offense has sent Wembley Stadium into a frenzy as a wide-eyed Davey Boy Smith seems to have found his stride. The British Bulldog hits his running power slam finishing move, the audience jump to their feet, but Bret kicks out at 2. There's a feeling now that Bret might actually defy the odds and beat Davey. The Hitman counters an apron suplex with a pinning German suplex, but Davey surprises everyone by kicking out. This match is going to continue, and even through all the hardships and even through the shaky start the matchup had, SummerSlam 1992's main event was becoming a classic before our eyes. Going back to Bret's DVD for the next spot, we learned that Davey was still a little off inside the ropes and he was still a little dangerous. Davey dropped me on the turnbuckle when he was doing a suplex. He was going to suplex me off the top, but he totally crotched me on the strut in the corner. It almost split me in half. It was a different kind of pain. The Hitman took a painful shot here, but the payoff was maybe worth it. Davey's superplex makes Wembley shake and it looks absolutely spectacular, and Bret keeps the match alive by kicking out at 2. The drama continues to rise when Bret and Davey knock each other down with a double clothesline, but Bret tries to take advantage by applying a sharpshooter while still grounded. The Hitman applies his finishing move as Vince McMahon screams into the headset that it's all over. The crowd wait to see if Davey's gonna give it all up, but Bulldog makes it to the ropes as Bret wonders what he has to do to end this match. Going back to Bret's book for the finish, the Hitman said, "The time had come to break the hearts of all my fans and forever change my destiny. Let's go home," I called as I slammed one last lifter into Davey's chest, rocking him hard enough to send sweat flying into the air. I squeezed his wrist as the cue to reverse me into the ropes, and I dove over him for a sunset flip, the simplest move in wrestling. But instead of falling backwards, we did the old Leo Burke finish. Davey fell forward, hooking my legs with his arms, collapsing on top of me and pinning me beautifully. 1, 2, 3, we did it. I did it. I lay on the mat feigning being heartbroken, but in fact I was elated. I was also exhausted and in considerable pain, but I knew that the handshake at the end would top it all off, the last detail in this drama. The scene at Wembley Stadium is one of absolute chaos mixed with absolute joy. The crowd lose their minds as Davey gets the win. It turned out to be an all-time great SummerSlam match, and it does make you wonder how things could have been if Davey was of sound mind. What could have been achieved here if both competitors were on their A-game inside Wembley Stadium? Still, take nothing away from what was achieved here. This could very well be considered Davey Boy's greatest match ever, and it really isn't a bad Bret Hart match either. There's a good balance of drama, high-impact moves, and storytelling here. Then it was time for the post-match handshake, and somehow Davey also managed to forget this part. Bret wrote, "I made out that I was too pissed off to shake Davey's hand. I'd planned all of this with Davey, but it became painfully obvious to me that he'd forgotten all about it. I desperately tried to make eye contact, but he was oblivious as Diana climbed into the ring crying. I can only assume for real. I'm thinking, come on Davey, look at me and we'll make them all cry. But Davey never caught on. Instead, he was trying to milk the crowd. I was thinking, the drama is with me, not them. For f***'s sake, please look at me, Davey." After too many attempts, I gave up and just walked over and shook his hand. He had completely missed one of the tiny moments that could make it all more real. But what could I do? The torch had been passed. I'm not so sure what the initial plan was here, because Davey does extend his hand to Bret. I think what's going on here is that this was supposed to play out differently. Maybe Davey was supposed to wait until Bret got out of the ring. Maybe Davey was supposed to square up to Bret before shaking his hand. Who knows, but Bret recalls being annoyed at the post-match celebration, so yeah, I'd be interested in finding out what was supposed to happen here. Also, I do think Bret is being a bit harsh, because the crowd still gives a fantastic pop when the brothers-in-law finally shake hands and embrace in the ring. Diana gets inside the ropes and a celebration ends SummerSlam 1992, leaving the fans with a happy ending. Bret wrote in his book, "When I got back to the dressing room, most of the boys had already left on the bus, but the ones who'd seen the match seemed blown away. I understand the art of losing and the power of sympathy. I knew that in a few weeks to come, it would be me who was over more than Warrior, Savage, Flair, even Davey. All of them had been excellently executed. I've always believed this was my greatest match, especially because I'd carried Davey all the way through it without anyone being the wiser. My dad would tell me later that it's one thing to have a great match, but it's another thing to have a great match in front of 80,000 people." Like it or not, Bret was right on the money here. The Hitman would go on to become WWF Champion just 2 months later. And as for Davey, well, Bulldog got himself fired and he dropped the IC title to Shawn Michaels. In losing this main event match at SummerSlam, Bret got himself more over, and that's something we should take into consideration when we accuse wrestling companies of burying wrestlers simply because they lost a match. Many of you watching this video will already have a good appreciation for Hart vs Smith at Wembley Stadium, but for those who didn't know the details of the matchup, I hope this gives you some new insight. This whole match is available on YouTube via the WWE's official channel, so there's no reason not to go back and look out for the more nuanced moments of the bout. Thanks very much for watching guys, and take care.